Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury.
Electrifying.
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast and the main podcast on a Tuesday. I was thinking we should change, because it's the main podcast, but it feels like it needs a name. What about the squad?
Is that taken? Is that
like the squad on the Cannon podcast? I think that'd be quite cool. Or, I don't know, something. Anyway, maybe people can suggest something in the comments. Welcome back to the Cannon podcast. Hope you're all doing very well on this fine Tuesday. We are here. No Rohan today, unfortunately, because he has something called work commitments. How rude. So we wish him well with that. But we are here with George. Hello, sir.
Hello, good sir.
We did do a whole hour on the instant reaction as we're recording yesterday. So if you want to hear sort of specifics on Manchester United, etc., we'll be talking obviously about that game and the sort of the fallout from that game, of course. But we've got a load more over there, so go check that out. We also, I believe, are now on video on Spotify. So if you're listening to us on Spotify, you can now watch us on video. We're going to try and incorporate, including today, some more sort of video elements into the show as well, just to take things up a little gear. But yes, we're back. Thank you all for joining us. George, it's been quite the 24 hours. It's been quite the 24 hours in the Arsenal sphere. Usual social media caveats aside, how are you feeling? How are you feeling 24 hours after what was quite a jarring experience, let's call it that?
I really echo my feelings in the IR that because of them has fueled the reaction a bit more than most. If I try to step back, and I always try to do those things, and I try to ask myself, really, how bad is it? You're not allowed to say it after such a result. And you're not allowed to have positivity after such a result, and there needs to be overarching criticism, and I just don't know if that's really helpful for a team that objectively has been incredibly consistent and the most consistent team in both the league and in Europe at this point. But yeah, on the weekend it was a bad day. It was a really bad day, and you're not allowed to say those things when it's such a bad day, and that's okay. That's okay as well. Yeah. But it does mean, when it's our job to kind of just reflect the next couple of days afterwards, and you're actually going into solution mode, there's definitely some things that I think we could take away that aren't reactionary from that game. They are things that I feel that are patterns that we've lacked throughout our time. And, at the same token too, it could be just a case of asking ourselves, is this team evolving? And every team does evolve. And I'm a lot more willing to be stronger on some of the assumptions I made in the summer about that team evolving and about our team evolving and about certain players and where we seem to be moving to, because I do think that the opposition always tells you your problems better than yourself and better than when you're winning. And so when you do have an issue and you don't have a great game, the opposition actually really does a good job about telling you why. And that is the goal, I think. I'm in solution mode. That's what I am. I was crying and I'm in solution mode.
And that's great. A few days like we should be. We should always allow ourselves that time just to be like, oh God, that hurt. And yeah, I've been in that mode. If you're not there yet, maybe wait a day or so and come back to the pod. But yeah, I think we're hopefully gonna do that. We're gonna blow up the attacking conversation and try and pick our way through that because there's so much there. We also want to talk about Eze. I want to talk about Havertz, and of course we'll be taking your questions. But yeah, I think starting there, George, I think is a really good place, because my thing at the minute is like trying to hold all of these truths at the same time, and it's really, really hard. And if you'd given me a button that said "end football" when that Cunha goal goes in, I'm like, I'll hit that. And it's so painful. It was such a painful the manner of the defeat, the sort of the manner of the issues that we're going to get into, because they are hitting on so many bruises in so many different ways, from the issues that we have in the team to the way we've had previous title races to the way even in it's. I think I saw a stat today. We've had 5 seasons in a row where our winter record has been awful, like really, really bad. I saw a stat somewhere. I might be able to find it. Well, I'll just pull it up because I was going to go to something else. But I'll try and find it in just a second. But it's pressing on so many bruises. But it's trying to hold that with also the bigger picture, and the starting place maybe is the next 3 in the Premier League. Arsenal are still 4 points clear. We have Leeds away, Sunderland at home, and Brentford away. Man City in the next 3 have Spurs away, They have to go to Anfield and they face Fulham at home. And Villa have Brentford at home. They have to go to Bournemouth away, and they have to play Brighton at home. And when I look at those, we will, of course, come to the issues that we have, and we should. But we are still in a really good position. And I think the thing for me, and I always forget this, we get so caught in like our issues, which do exist. Of course they do. But our job isn't to be perfect. Our job is to be the least not perfect. Like I said this on the instant reaction. And I think I look around and I see a very imperfect league. Whether you want to say that's because of the lack of quality, I completely disagree. I think it's quality evening out. It's sort of it's the league becoming this sort of super league de facto thing, and meaning I don't necessarily think it's that City or Liverpool have got worse, if so maybe only marginally, but the biggest story for me is the teams like the Villas and the Forest and all those players. Anyway, we've discussed that many times. The point being that what we've ended up with is a league of imperfect teams, and our job is not to be perfect, it's to be the least imperfect. And I still believe, and I want to ask you now, that we are the least imperfect team. We have problems, of course. We're going to go into them, and we'll get the lovely tactics board up in a second. But that is still how I feel. I don't know where you're at.
100%. And I've actually really been trying to reflect a little bit more deeply as far as, I'm looking at the league getting better. And, when you're saying to be the least perfect, but I think it's also a direct correlation potentially of how much analysis we have on hand. Like, I'm trying to also just step back for a second and, what we do here, which we love everybody for supporting, but, this idea of our podcast, of other podcasts talking about football and being accepted in the media as genuine analysis now. And that shift has pushed a lot more hyper-focusing in terms of play, in terms of specific issues. And I think that this translates a little bit in terms of building or maybe clouding our judgment about the past in terms of how many issues there were. Like, I swear if I took a game and tried to analyze the 2000s and I looked at the distances between the two and I actually sat there to do it and we did think pieces about the set piece narrative. Like, 10, 15 years ago, Sky Sports wasn't doing a specific analysis on Arsenal set pieces, but that's the state of football that we're in, because I think a lot of fans have been engaging in that type of content. So there is this almost tension where I think that people want this type of analysis, but with it becomes a lot more criticism, less focus on the positives, because you need something to talk about. If everybody's brilliant, then there's nothing to talk about. If somebody is poor or somebody's lacking something and you're explaining something, that's the content space. And that content space doesn't even just apply to us. I think it's also leaking into major media, and it's what a lot of football fans want. I think we've evolved as a entertainment industry, if I can, in wanting this type of content. So it leaves more criticism at baseline. Not to get too meta and actually answer your question about how are we the least the least perfect team, and the consistency.
The least imperfect.
The least imperfect team, sorry. We are still, I think the proof is in the pudding, simply put. In terms of the position, like, people tend to get very output driven when we try to make some major points at times, right? And just factually, we're top of the Champions League. We've had major wins in the last year against Bayern Munich, Madrid, Atletico Madrid. That's not a coincidence. That doesn't mean that we are suddenly some of the worst attacking teams in the world when you have major results against those type of teams who are considered widely as some of the best in the world. And I'm going to throw PSG in there because we had brilliant performances against PSG. It wasn't just it was a bad. We had poor finishing in the moment, and I think it cost us the tie, but we still had brilliant performances against them. So that in general, I tend to always look at how we do in Europe as well as a little bit of a barometer, and how do we do against some of the best teams if we're talking about major issues. And we have been objectively brilliant there. But this season, we did take a turn in the league as far as our big results against the traditional Big Six. And I do think that has dominated a bit more of the narrative because we have substituted it for more consistency against teams outside the traditional top six. All in all, we're still first. 4 points in the league. We've got a run of fixtures in which you would hope that this lead does. And I think a week in football changes everything from the worst to the best. And, we could be in a position where we're talking like this in literally a week, but it's this expectation of a winning Arsenal is the problem. mate, for me, if I'm really being honest with you, because the feeling of needing to win, not just the impact on the fans, but I think the team is something that I'm looking towards. This freedom aspect, which we'll get into in terms of whether it's coaching enforced or not. But I do feel the pressure this squad has, and they know it, about getting a trophy, is why, for me, the Carabao Cup has always been incredibly important for what we want to do. And breaking that duct, just regardless of what it is something that I think the intangible of doing something like that and what it brings to your confidence, your ability to become more risk averse or not, and strike that balance. You become confident in yourself in a way that can't be done without securing that feeling and getting that monkey off your back. And you know what? I really feel that's potentially one of the biggest things this Arsenal team can do beyond the little structure stuff, beyond that stuff, because we are an incredibly well-coached team. And despite the fact that I think that there's improvements we can make, it doesn't take away from the fact that we've been the most consistent team in Europe and in the league, factually.
I think that's really well said, and a couple of things to pick up on. I think the mentality. Well, I'll make the first point because it kind of leads into the second. The content gap thing is so huge, and I think specifically the way it happens, every single game is analysed and dissected, and we're part of it. We are absolutely part of it, and we're all so hungry for that type of analysis, and we go into every single defeat and win and loss, whatever the situation is, and try and get absolutely everything out of it. I wouldn't be surprised if the average fan, simply because of how much time people spend engaging in media now, I would love to know the difference, let's say, between how much time does a fan from 2006 to 2026 spend thinking about Arsenal, like just the average fan. And I bet you'd see a huge gap, simply because it's in their algorithm. It's not necessarily they're even looking for it. It's what's on the group chat, and that's where you're spending your time. So you're spending so much more time doing it, and then that makes it really, really hard to see the wood for the trees and to work out, okay, what's the consistent patterns here? What's the real issues? Because there are issues for sure, but what's the real ones, and what's the ones that we're kind of like just going over and over in our heads? And actually, for example, and this is the second point, I think yesterday, to me, that didn't read like a mentality issue in the sense of not wanting it. It was almost wanting it too much to me. And I think it's very easy to see a game like that and see some mistakes, or they're not in it, whatever. But I actually think sometimes, and maybe the way the players consume media is part of it, they want it so much. They're so aware of the narratives. They're so aware of what's at stake. They're so aware of what will be said about them if they don't do it, that it causes, you score a goal, right?
Yeah.
And actually, and maybe that's seeping in. And I think also your point in terms of the proof is in the pudding. There was a graphic came up after the Inter game, which again, back to this point, the Inter game feels like a million years ago. It was literally, the other day we were basking in the glory of a 3-1.
Yeah. The
last 18 months, right? 2-0 against Paris Saint-Germain at home in the Champions League, 3-1 away against Inter Milan, 2-1 away at the Bernabeu, the 7-1 against PSV, the 5-1 against Sporting, the win against Spurs, the 3-2 against Spurs, the 4-1 against Spurs, the 3-1 against Bayern, the 5-0 against Chelsea. You go through, over and over and over again, and you couldn't imagine that, 3-4 years ago. And it is this dissection of every single game that sort of leads to this sort of panicking feeling. But we are where we are. And our job, I hope, or what at least we're trying to do, is to sort of get a sense of, okay, what's working and what isn't. So maybe let's sort of step forward to that now. One thing I am a little bit frustrated about, George, is I don't know if you caught Mikel's post-match, and I've been looking back through them today for something. He does tend to highlight the sort of individual and the execution in when he's coming out after games. Now, does that mean that he's not thinking at all about the structure? No, of course it doesn't. But I'll give you an example. Post-Liverpool, we struggled to dominate the game because we gave some very unnecessary balls away. Okay. Post-Forest, we lacked certain composure on the next 2 or 3 passes to be in the right areas. Post-United, First half hour, we were very dominant, playing the areas that we wanted, score a goal, had 2 fantastic chances to score another one. They had 2 brilliant goals, some individual quality. With the changes, I think we managed to shift the energy. So there's a lot of conversation on structure. No, the opposite. There's a lot of conversation on individuals and magic moments and dominance, and come back to that word in a second, and giving balls away and composure, which all feels like it leads back to the individual. How much do you believe Mikel really sees the structural issues we're about to get into? Do you think he sees them in the way that we do? And if not, why? If you can try and answer that question.
I'm going to try to answer this question in classic analogy fashion. Look, whenever you're in an argument and somebody is telling a particular character flaw that you know that you have, and you're seeing it from multiple people. In the moment, you say, no, I don't do that. Everyone's told you. You want to objectively step back. Everyone is telling you that you act this way, but you don't acknowledge it in the moment. And it normally takes a big event. It takes a big thing in your life, maybe a big family illness or something, or, a big breakup, something like that, for you to say, okay, hold on, let me listen to the outside. The reason I kind of bring that up is because I'm sure he's got tons of people saying it. What we're going to say is something that I don't think many fans within our own fan base haven't said for quite a while. And I also don't think that this idea is something that his technical analysts haven't at least explored once, twice, 3 times. But the problem is there's things that shake you in life and things that let you step back and try to reanalyze whether that's a you problem or a them problem. And a lot of times you struggle to do that when you're dealing with issues, right? So that shock, we try to draw conclusions like the first time he's done a quadruple sub. Is that something that, when's the last time he's done that? Is that a big enough, oh God, is that a big enough breakup, a big enough stressor in your life to say, okay, it didn't work, but I recognize the dial of risk averse to not, and I need to do something about it. So that I think is the biggest issue when we're talking about some of these things, because I am not dumb enough to make this assertion that I am smarter than Mikel Arteta. And I am not dumb enough to say I'm even smarter than some of the major professionals that have gone out there. I just want to suggest things that maybe we can do, because the smartest people also sometimes cannot see the wood through the trees. And that doesn't make them unintelligent. It just means that other things are blocking their vision. And sometimes we need someone or something to open up our field of view. It's simply that simple. And that can be applied in life. So I don't think Mikel is alone and immune to some of these basic things that we deal with.
No, and I think the major event, as always, George, I like that analogy. I think it's a really good one. And I think it may take a game like the United game and to lose it in that way.
Exactly.
Possibly, who knows? Maybe something shifts from here on out. And I was doing some digging on something else that we'll come to on later on. I know for a fact that Mikel is being told these things. I know it. I know he's being challenged. But of course, you have your principles, you have your things that you believe in, you have the things that you believe work, and also again, I keep going back to it on an individual basis in a game, and we lose again, and we all go, oh my God, why can't you see this? But over 6 years, you can't argue this guy isn't right on a lot of stuff. This is the thing. It's like, so he's got a pretty big leg to stand on. So while you're sort of bringing that up, I just want to bring 3 things, and I think these things are basically what I can see as the fundamental reoccurring issues in the final third that I think we sort of speak about regularly, and I think have been going on since about 2024. People might disagree with that, agree with that, whatever. Number 1 is platforming our best players. I think right now the sort of case in point is the Timber and Capier being inside 6-7 times out of 10, and Saka's on the outside. The second is the predictability. So it's the lack of variety in terms of every ball going wide, or the spaces that we're trying to go to, or continue to go into Saka or swinging balls, whichever way you sort of spin that, not feeling like we have enough variety in our attacking play. And the final one is the sort of the risk question, balancing keeping the ball and recycling the ball versus risk. And I think John McKenzie did a video on Martin Odegaard making a decision. I think it's on 27 minutes, not to hyper-analyze just on one moment, but it kind of sums up this thing where he's got two options to play inside the block. He doesn't play them and the ball goes wide, or we miss two potential 3v2 situations. So if you go check that out. Those are the three. I mean, then we could go into sort of signings and stuff like that, but that's a slightly different thing. But from a Mikel coaching perspective, where are you on that? And then let's get into this.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said absolutely for balance. I've talked a lot on the pod as far as balancing, for example, runners and passers within the front line. Those are things that I think that Mikel can do a little bit better job of. Just very simple, in the sense of, there are times in which I feel as though we're a little bit too far in the dial of every single one in the front line likes the ball to feet. And then we switch the dial in some games that everybody likes to run beyond. And then when you don't strike a balance between those qualities, that's when you don't find the perfect song, So there's a lot of times in which balance plays a very key role. And as far as risk aversion and non-risk aversion, this is going to be a longer conversation that we'll try to get into as far as teasing these things out more naturally. Because I think the risk aversion comes when you've got better quality in the areas that you ask for it. When you talk about maybe why a pass isn't getting released, there's absolutely a component to the out of possession work that we've done. And it is very clear that Mikel has had a switch in his early part of his tenure. And it's kind of pre and post that big Man City result. You could really argue, not to pin one result on it, but that really seemed to be a bookend towards his philosophy in general. So there definitely is maybe an overcorrection. So I don't want to ignore those points. But really simply, I don't want to get too nerdy. And so I'm going to try to explain this for those that maybe don't have the visuals up there. But, I really encourage everyone to pop over to YouTube as well, just to see this in the intro.
And Spotify now.
And Spotify, yes. You can absolutely see both there. But we're going to dissect this really simply and try not to get too complicated. But this right here represents our base 4-3-3 in a sense, what I would consider potentially our best team. We haven't really seen Kai Havertz too much, but I would argue that striker position can be filled in with whoever you want. But generally speaking, the outside team has been the quote-unquote Mikel's preferred team. Calafiori at left back, Gabriel Magalhaes, Saliba, Timber at right back, Odegaard, Zubimendi, Rice, Trossard this season, and Saka represent the most informed wingers, and Havertz. I've just put for now. That is our base 4-3-3. Now, the issue becomes, I like to throw this little rotation, which we are now, again, for those audio listeners, we're just simply showing what happens in a low block. When teams tend to sit in, Arsenal's response is to do a kind of 2-3-5 formation, in which we see Declan Rice, Zubimendi, and Martin Odegaard, who likes to drop out of the block to receive, constitute our middle three, and the front five seems to be Trossard and Saka holding the width. And we've seen this quite a bit, in which the fullbacks drop into the half space areas. And we've seen Calafiori and Timber at different points come inside. Now, I really want to emphasize, this is not something that is a mainstay. These are rotations. These happen within game. It's about striking the balance and the proportion of how often we see things like this. And far too many times this season, I have seen our fullbacks in these areas. And I want to highlight the big square that I've made here. Odegaard, when he drops out of the block and you basically have Calafiori and Timber, there are arrows to show the underlap movement here in this little tactical board. And the big thing that I wanted to say is, naturally, even on their strong side foot, Timber and Calafiori aren't connecting together. And all you're going to see is this almost kind of inclination to do the wide passing. I mean, Declan Rice can drive through in the middle of the park, but Calafiori and Timber aren't going to enjoy passing to each other. They're not naturally going to want to do that. They're going to want to underlap to create space for someone to drive into. And naturally, you are pushing Saka and Trossard out wide. And I would argue these are two of our biggest output threats here, regardless. And when you're pushing your biggest output threats, which speaks to the platforming point on the outside, the issues that I've got is, when you've got people in the half space and we talk about pinning, it's just a technical term for someone being on the inside and able to receive, right? And pushing the defensive line back. These guys, Timber and Calafiori, even when they do receive in these areas, the best that they can do is stretch it vertically. Go to where the arrows are going to go. They're going to do an underlap, but it does not promote any kind of horizontal passing at all. And then you result in this big square of emptiness in which we've seen, and it actually promotes the U shape even more than other things. So that's a problem for us, and that's kind of problem number one.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and I think actually the player you have in there in Calafiori, there might be a bit more dynamism, at least in the interpretation of that, and there might be, with those stretching runs that you're talking about, there might be some spaces created in that regard. I completely take your point about the sort of horizontal passing. When it's in Capier, it's even worse, and this is not to blame Capier necessarily, because it's just not who he is, not where I'd put him. It's a big concern, and I think maybe some people have said before, sort of situations, well, but players rotate, and this is what you got to expect, and they're not always there. It's like, yeah, that's potentially true, but there's periods in games where, firstly, I feel that they're there more than Trossard and Saka are, and secondly, it's up to the players to understand when the right time to be there is and when the wrong time to be there is. And if you're there consistently, that tells me that there's a coaching aspect to it, where it's like, I need you. Mikel's told them, I need you here in these certain situations. And whatever he's told them, I think we can all feel it's too much. And it creates that complete lack of zone 14 access, which we've seen. I think also, and we mentioned this in the United game, the goals, the two goals they scored, the first one more to the point, the combinations inside killed us. It was the combinations between Dorgu and Bruno Fernandes. That's what demoralizes teams. That's what creates overloads and then spaces to open up. Obviously, the Cunha thing is, I think, Declan Rice overcommitting and leaving that space. But we concede the goal from that space. Why? Because it's one of the most dangerous areas on the football pitch. And if you can't access it because of where your fullbacks are stood and where your eight stood, big problem.
Well, exactly, and I think it's because our eights like the space. They all drop out of the space, and the difference with this kind of iteration is I'm just going to move Calafiori a little bit more central. These guys aren't as comfortable to drop into this zone to play a quick, kind of, I call it the up, back, and through pattern of play that we see. They're not as comfortable doing these things, and so when you have fullbacks in those areas to receive, they're not naturally going to want to drop into those areas and do those things. Although they 90% of the time would prefer not to do them. And I think one bit of almost devil's advocate to this before we go to the next screenshot really quickly is I did want to share Arsenal fullbacks are 9 for 75 on crosses, which represents a 12% accuracy on crosses. And the only devil's advocate thing that I could see is that we've seen this rotation happen more than we want to because our fullbacks simply don't have the accuracy in those wide areas to deliver crosses, and they simply haven't shown one. I mean, you're looking at Urian Timber, he is 2 for 32. You look at Calafiori, he is 3 for 20. You look at Ben White, he's 2 for 13. Hincapié is 2 for 10. Miles hasn't attempted one. So that is, a problem, especially if you're saying, if I want to show a formation that has fullbacks in wide areas, they need to show an accuracy crossing. Otherwise, we're not going to get the ball even into the pocket areas, even if they are more dangerous. So this is just a little devil's advocate. So it's not always completely wrong, and it could be a reason why. But I still want us to go to this kind of third rotation. And I'm going to suggest something. And this is a way in which I feel that we can still have some of the same principles that Mikel has done out of possession in our base 4-3-3, but let's call it the low block that promotes more technical people in the half spaces. So same back four, and it's just, bear with me, having a Bukayo Saka, for example, in the 10, having an Eze at the quote-unquote left wing, and having Madueke at right wing. It's going to look like a little bit of a stark change, but I'm going to show what this has an impact on in the final third. Still keeping a lot of our principles of the 2-3-5, still having, by the way, an opportunity for us to have kind of one touchline winger and, one fullback, maybe a little bit more on the outside. But when we see that Eze and Saka, by the way, are the ones that are promoted to be in the half spaces as much as we can, first thing that I want everyone to see is Eze and Saka are both able to burst beyond the line, just like Calafiori and just like Timber would have been. The difference is when you look at it out wide, Calafiori and Madueke both represent people that have incredible running power, that are both two-way and still offer the isolated 1v1 threat on the outside. But Eze and Saka can pass next to each other, mate. Like, you've now opened completely different quality in terms of people being able to drop. So I'll throw Eze down there. If you want Eze to drop, to do close combination play, Eze feels comfortable giving it to Saka on the inside, who can feed it through. Eze can feel comfortable for Rice to carry on the outside, or even to file a ball off to Calafiori. You now have somebody who, even under contact, is comfortable in those tight spaces. And it doesn't just receive it to Eze. You know, Saka also has that ability as well. And you don't lose the ability to still hold width on the outside. And so the biggest kind of takeaway that I have from this too is, as far as your out of possession work, Yuri and Timbers can still cover for some of the deficiencies that Madueke would have. If you really wanted to have a Ben White switch about this, all these iterations are still the same. You probably get a little bit more passing from a deep Ben White for the cross and those things. However, this approach in which we still ask our most technical players to be on the inside naturally promotes you to be more risky, because you find players that are comfy dealing with contact behind and being able to roll that contact. I mean, Saka's one of the best in the world at that. And, you know, you look at Eze, who's no slouch in that specific regard as well. And it just naturally promotes those things. Whereas when you have people like the kind of the Calafiori and the Timber approach that we were talking on the inside, these players are less likely to want to drop on the inside, take the pressure, turn, and slide someone through. And so you've naturally promoted some of those differences.
And I think that the sad part is, George, is if even if you just swapped Trossard and Calafiori and Timber and Saka, you'd probably get better results. We don't even need necessarily to go to that other version. It's just, you know, I completely agree. If you just go back to that other version as well before we sort of move on from this, I think it's great. And I think, to be honest, the only issues you might look at is you go, okay, you've got Madueke as a left winger on the right, and you've got Eze as a you know, a right-footed player on the left. You know, you're potentially shrinking the spaces, but because you've got the natural width in Calafiori, and because you've got Timber who can go beyond, because you've got Saka who can rotate out wide as well, that doesn't sort of create the same issues for me. I think this makes me all quite confused about what our thinking was with the Man United game. We ended up in a situation where we had Victor Gyökeres, we had Rice in the 6, we had Marino right 8, Eze left 8, Saka on the left and Madueke on the right. That is 3, and again, Saka is not necessarily this when he's playing on the right, but on the left, naturally, he's stretching the pitch because that's his natural foot, and that's where he's going to go. Gyökeres is stretching the pitch, and Madueke is stretching the pitch. Yeah. And I think, again, this balance here creates enough stretch and enough link. But yeah, I think the big question, whether you like this iteration or there's another iteration that you like or whatever, is what we haven't got right consistently. And going back to that sort of list of 3 that I said at the beginning, is this balance, is the joined up thinking that we were talking about in the instant reaction. And I think overall, George, like, people will agree, disagree with a suggested iteration. But what's quite exciting, but what's good is we all kind of see the problem. We all kind of agree. Like, we all sort of are going, something's wrong in the attack. And I'm not... people booed at the end. And whether you like that or not, I think it's because people are seeing something. And I think wherever you get off on this, the outcome of this situation cannot be 42 goals in the league, 22 of them from open play, putting you on for the lowest return from open play in the last 10 years, having signed 3 forwards. The outcome of it cannot be your top scorer in the Premier League having 5 goals. And throw all the context and I hear it, but that can't be the outcome. And so I'm really hoping that we see different solutions, is what I'm getting to. I don't mind which version do you like George's version? Do you like my version? Do you like your own? Whatever. I don't care. I just want to see different solutions, and it feels like we're seeing the same thing consistently over and over again. And it's that Einstein quote, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So yeah, that's my main feeling. I want to see changes against Leeds. I want to see whether it's a different usage of a player, different scenarios that players are in. I don't want to hear Mikel after a game that's a 0-0 with created barely nothing talk about execution again. I really don't. I want to see a different setup, a different sandbox for these players to get into. And I was going to say, do you agree? But I know you do.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Let's move on to, because we're going to talk about Eze and sort of his usage and how he's been used so far by Mikel. But yeah, let us know in the comments. Like, what do you think is the best version? I'm sure, as I say, people will agree, disagree with each other's versions. But I think the place we're all unified is like, this version of the team can't continue. But equally, back to kind of what we were talking about before, that's also there's an opportunity here. We've lost against United. We've had the cluster, right? And I hope, in a positive sense, that something's changing. And whether it's Kai Havertz coming back into the team, whatever it might be, I really hope we take this opportunity. We do something. And I do feel with that quad substitution, with Odegaard coming off, with some of the signs you're getting, I do wonder whether we're going to see something quite significant change.
You'd hope so. And I mean, it's kind of like a little bit relating to some of the things that we said earlier in the pod, as far as what life event is going to make you open your eyes and open your field of view just a little bit more. And again, I just don't doubt that, one of the most meticulous men I know, period, in football, and one of the most meticulous clubs in world football that have done so well to exemplify the margins are simply ignoring it. I don't think that's, the most likely thing. I definitely think you can be somebody that's a little bit, too focused on the details, and you can be like too much in that sense. And, you're not saying, hey, let's just keep it a little bit more simple and just tweak things like that. Having somebody being able to do that, I think, is possible. Like, that is a possible explanation. But, I think moving forward, we're looking at a team that fundamentally is also at a tension with who this club is. Having some of the best, it was defined on pocket players that were incredibly technical. And, I think whilst we've done this right now to gain consistency of results, it's that tension of, is consistency of results going to be worth it? And it's only worth it when you win. And a lot of these questions tend to be yes or no, depending on the outcome, because we've been super technical and then concede in Mikel's tenure, which ended up not winning, by the way. We've been incredibly conservative in moments as opposed to being super technical, and it's resulted in us not quite winning. And so we've actually seen both stories. So this idea that really, regardless if you're in one camp or the other, it's always been a balance, and life is a balance. You never want too much of one thing. And it's always more about tweaks than it is about hammering somebody for lacking a very basic principle of football. Because I can assure you, the most basic coaches, when you go in for your big UEFA licensing, this is not magic. Like, I'm not trying to present that I've got the magic pill. And I think a lot of people look for a magic pill when you're upset, right? And that could be an illness or whatnot. Like, we tend to want the easy solution. Oh, it's just this. And we all want it to be that simple. So I think we'll strike the tension. And it's really about those principles that you talked about. And I think striking the balance, making sure we're platforming our best players a little bit more, getting them in spaces that they prefer, making sure that we strike that balance between risk aversion and risk a little bit better, and making sure that this team is confident to do so, because they can, and they've got the talent to do it.
And that's another big part of it is them feeling that they can do that. And again, we're sort of hoping for something to shift. That it may be imperceptible. It may be 3 or 5 more passes into the block in one game, but that's how close I think we are. That's the thing. I think 5 more passes into the block per game could be the difference here. So it doesn't necessarily, we're going to talk about Eze now, it doesn't necessarily have to be dropping a player or whatever. I do wonder whether there's some value in a big shift right now. Maybe playing Marino as a 9 and just sort of doing that for like 5 games. Maybe there's something in sort of sending a message, because I think this team, the attack needs a shake. And I wonder whether something too imperceivable might not give that shake to both the players and the fans, but equally it could be something super imperceptible. Let's come to Eze, because we said we'd talk about him on the main pod and or the squad, whatever we're going to call it. And we want to take your questions as well, so we'll do this and then sort of come to your questions. In terms of his performance so far this season, so he's at 1,700 minutes for Arsenal, which I think is actually relatively good. I'll look where that sort of ranks in the team in just a second. The Wolves game, the game he came off, he was then on the bench for the next 4 Premier League games. He then played 12 minutes against Liverpool. He played 11 minutes against Nottingham Forest. Obviously, he played 32 minutes against Manchester United. So he is, I suppose, growing back into the team a little bit. In that time, to be fair, he played in the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup. He was on the bench against Chelsea, but he also played against Inter Milan as well. So he's not just been totally frozen out. I don't know if we can have the Eze conversation, George, without sort of also having the Odegaard one. And we touched on this a little bit in the instant reaction. I think Odegaard is it's all related, is maybe emblematic of the issues that we're having. Odegaard, to me, maybe his biggest flaw, but one of them, is his inability to what feels to me is to mould to a game. It feels like Odegaard is playing his game, sort of no matter what. And we might see him pop up in slightly different spaces, but he for me, he struggles. Obviously, he struggles sort of inside the block to deal with contact, which we've spoken about many times. It doesn't feel like that's moved on in his game in the last 2 or 3 years, even though people have sort of always said that since he came in. That hasn't really shifted for me. Okay. The desire to play with 3, 4, 5 touches, that doesn't feel like to me it particularly changes. It really suits certain games. And everyone goes, oh my God, Odegaard's back. But again, he sort of kind of reverts to type. He is a recycler. He is a player with a certain angle bias who doesn't, in the same way that you watch Bukayo Saka developing this both way quality. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen a Martin Odegaard right foot develop since sort of, I don't know, if I went back and watched the game from 2022, I think I'd see almost the same player. Maybe that's wrong. I play in a different moment and in a different sort of conversation, but I haven't seen development massively in his game. And then that means when he's the captain and he's the symbol and he's sort of Arteta's coach on the pitch and he's doing the same thing over and over again, he gets caught up in that conversation, which I think maybe is partly slightly unfair. And Eze kind of becomes this other option. He is seen as almost the dynamic one, the exciting one. He's the one that is the antidote to Odegaard. Whereas actually, I wonder if he really is, but he is seen that way, I think, by certain portions of the fans. What do you make of Eze's usage? I've done some digging today, and from everything I hear, it's nothing untoward. Because I was thinking, is there something off the pitch that we don't know? Apparently, no. Certainly from what I've managed to find out, which isn't very much, but Detective. Is something. Detective. There's nothing I could find out. Certainly, it's just a selection thing, I think. So what do you make of it?
Okay. I also think there's a conversation to be had with Eze, but I actually think it's the wrong player as a comparison to. We just naturally do it because they're 10s, or they're seen as 10s in this team. The issue with Odegaard has more to do with Zubimendi than it does with Eze for me. And when you're having a player like Odegaard, who his natural game is to drop out of the block to progress play. That is his instinct. It's what we've always wanted him to do. Some of his best games have come from dropping out of the block and splitting the center backs and coming in deeper to go and help us out of a difficult build-up moment. But this team has evolved. It no longer struggles in build-up, and it did for a time. And that painted the story of what Odegaard's natural instincts were. And the higher up the pitch that Odegaard gets, the more risk averse he gets, because his natural inclination is to keep possession of the ball. And he's one of the best, I think, pocket players in terms of doing that task, keeping the ball. Now, when you're talking about these low blocks, as far as wanting to keep the ball, we don't have an issue with that. That actually is the complete opposite goal of what you would want. You have the ball, you actually want to stress a bit more. So you want somebody that's able to do those things. And Eze represents a 10 who, as we said, and you mentioned before, is somebody that can deal in contact better, has a little bit more invention, has a little bit more 1-2 touch, natural inclination, somebody that wants to ride challenges, pass, and follow his pass a bit more. Martin Odegaard wants to shimmy, open up, switch play, and then jog over to offer himself as an option, but he's not bursting beyond. He's not looking to receive after that. It's more about finding a solution and a safe one and letting other people do the next aggressive action. And he's just not aggressive with his passing enough, whereas Eze is quite aggressive. The reason why I brought up Zubimendi a little bit earlier in this kind of little mini monologue is that we have somebody that is supposed to be the metronome, someone that we've loved and someone that nearly every major club in world football wanted to metronome. So naturally, it's about roles. And it's something that I remember saying here on the Cannon podcast, in which I struggle. And I think that we will see the redundancy of Martin Odegaard with Zubimendi. And it's all about understanding, who do you want dropped out of the block dictating? And that's going to be this really simple question. And if you want Eze to have more of an influential role, Eze shouldn't be doing that. Eze should be the one that's high in the pockets, being an option and a threat. And his simple presence, by the way, is going to draw defenders near him, because if you give Eze space in those central areas, he's shown that he can kill you. So naturally, teams will follow, much in the same way, by the way, that we talked about Julian Alvarez and his potential impact on gravity. Having somebody that drops out of that block that will receive and go forward and attack and be aggressive naturally draws players out of their own line. And if you have Martin Odegaard staying high and doing those things, teams know what he's like. They don't have that threat, so they leave it. And they know that he doesn't want to. And you end up having a confusion of role. And that's really where a lot of these questions and the demands are coming. And, when you have a look at Martin Odegaard, as far as his influence, regardless of what you or I or other people might think, his influence has waned this season. How much that continues or not is kind of up to him and his ability to adapt. But I certainly feel that this team is evolving into a team that is asking for a bit more risk, a bit more willingness to receive high and in tight areas, because we're going to be facing more low blocks. We're going to be facing teams that want to clog the center, and we're going to be facing teams that, don't even want to attempt to disrupt us and build up because we're too good. We're too good. So they're like, okay, let's let them play and see if they can play through us. And that just is almost opposed to his natural instinct.
They not only don't want to build up against, they don't not only don't want to press against us, they don't want to build up against us.
No.
And so one of his big things, if we go back to 22-23, was how good he is in the press, and that's absolutely who he is. And this is not in any way a kind of, leagues and teams and situations, whether it's Zubimendi or the context of the league in terms of how teams are defending, or the physicality of the league, or just the way things naturally evolve. It's no slight on him. It's just not. He's just not where the league is at right now. And I think the Nottingham Forest game to me was really, really emblematic of that. But I think maybe Eze's problem, just to bring it back to that, and maybe why he's not being selected, is I feel like he's kind of in the middle of two roles, or maybe even three roles. And I think Arteta kind of feels that. When he's in the right eight, he hasn't yet imposed himself. I would say there's a decent sample in November when he was playing as the right eight with Gyökeres, where we probably arguably looked at our best. So maybe you can make an argument here. But I think in terms of the out of possession stuff, there's more that Arteta demands from him in there. And again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying I think that's the reason he's not selecting him there, because he even will put Marino there over him at times. In the left eight, I think that feels to me more like an interpretation again, in terms of Declan Rice. He sort of trusts his judgment of when to jump and when to stay back, when to support the attack, when to stay back. And maybe when he's chasing a game, he'll go with Eze, because he goes, okay, you can go and chase that game. And on the left-hand side, I don't think he's been given the time to sort of cement his role. And Trossard's been in the form that he's in. So he's sort of been caught in this place where it's like, I don't quite know where you are. To me, that's kind of the only explanation. And the reason I bring up the Odegaard thing is because I think the clamour and the frustration, I think people would be more accepting of the kind of caught between a number of roles thing if Odegaard was performing in a different way, if the league was in a different way, if we went in a different way. We'd be going, okay, but Odegaard's performing that well. You're taking Rice and Trossard out of the team? No, you're not. So we can't understand it, and that's why I think Odegaard becomes almost the sort of the jeweler in the sort of Mortal Kombat moment. It's like it's you v you, man, and you seem to be the guy I want. I don't know where Eze goes from here in this situation. Not that I think he's going to lead the club or whatever, but I can't predict it. I guess is my point, because I'm thinking about him in the right slot, and as I said, I think the out of possession stuff, the way Odegaard has presented it, the combination with Saka, I don't know exactly how that would work. Because I think, I just can't see it right now. The left-hand side, again, Trossard, are we going to be, is it going to be signing a winger? And then the left half space, we've got Declan Rice in there. And if you want to move him, then fair enough. But I can't call it. So for me, I know we wanted to talk about it, but I almost don't think there is an answer. You know what I mean?
Well, okay, part of my thing is I don't want to do this, but if you really want to go through output, Arsenal had the most open play goals in November. And it's when we see this iteration. And I don't think that's not related. And it was enough of a sample throughout the month in which there was consistency of play. It's when he had his most consistent run in the team. And by the way, there was teething issues because even prior to that in November, it was like Odegaard had got injured, but him and Eze were going in and out of the team, right? So there was this tension about trying to teach Eze the role of pressing and whatnot. And then finally, when he got a run in the team, and I don't think it was perfect, but his best run coordinated with some of the best open play performance of the team. Is that just down to him? I think that can be a bit obtuse, but I definitely think it's a factor in which we're looking at some of the issues that we're having right now. And I think Trossard's form has asked more questions than we thought. There's a lot of theory that Trossard's profile offers what you would expect an Eze to, and what a lot of people wanted an Eze to be. The creative left winger that was secure, that had some ability to come off the left, right? And I do think that, a big part of this also, mate, is, I think Calafiori is a huge miss to the left-hand side as far as the dynamism that he's been able to provide. And it's what makes Trossard brilliant as well, in addition to his individual performances. But, having that solution means that, if we look at Trossard and having an alternate, we should have one in Eze. We do have sample of Eze performing well in the right 8. We have sample of Eze performing well, but Eze needs to have his own identity. And at some point, I don't want to be rude and coddle people that I like, but he was 70 million pounds. At some point, he's got to say, this is me. And for as much as he's been a player that I think saying he's been bad is not right, but he hasn't been 70 million pounds. Regardless, and he has to at some point make his name in this Arsenal team and not use the history of his Palace days to justify inclusions. And I think that's not the case. I really think he can do more, and we should give him more, and that's a little bit on us. But also Eze needs to burst through the barn door himself, absolutely, and say, this is me, I am your number 10, right?
The question is which barn door to go through, but I'm just looking at the numbers here. Martin Odegaard's injured in the West Ham game, and he misses the Fulham, Palace, Burnley, Sunderland and Tottenham game. In that time, Eze starts all those games, and I believe he starts at right 8 in all of those games. And from the West Ham game, which we win 2-0, we have a good performance. I know it's in terms of the numbers, it went crazy against Fulham, but 1-0. We beat Burnley 2-0, we beat Crystal Palace 1-0. We have that draw at Sunderland. We had the 4-1 against Tottenham. But there's some good performances in that. I think also in the Champions League, we have some good wins in there. I think the Atletico game, which he played, he played 73 minutes in. We had the Slavia Prague game, the Bayern game, etc. Sort of in that period. So we're looking good in that little period in that November. I think we scored the most open play goals in November of any team in the league.
Yeah.
The moment Odegaard's back, he's back in the team. So he plays against Brentford. That's when he's back. He plays 33 minutes against away at Stamford Bridge, and he comes back against Brentford. And against Brentford, Eze gets shifted to the left wing. He plays another half at left wing against Aston Villa, which he gets taken off. He's then brought on against Wolves. He starts against Wolves, and then he is on the bench. Yeah, then he's on the bench. So this is why I bring it up as the Odegaard thing, because we're trying to understand what's Eze's usage in the team. It feels to me it's related to Odegaard. It's related to where Odegaard is the right 8, and Eze kind of has to deal with it. I think you're right, but that's the that's the barn door. I think we've got a problem we've outlined in the opening sort of half an hour of the show or so. We've got a player who's in a questionable moment, and we've got another player who we don't feel maybe that's his best role in there. Had a run in the team, looked quite good, and could possibly come in and be this shift that we're after. I'm also looking at Odegaard's usage. He's been taken off in the 57th and 58th minute in the last 2 Premier League games. Is there a world you see Eze being given a run of games as the right as this kind of shift moment?
I'm smiling if you can't see me, only because it's something that I've asked for in the summer. The problem is, mate, I do think, regardless of whatever you think, what you just said about being substituted in those minutes in the last 2 Premier League games, I think speaks volume for any player, especially a player that was, never. And
just to add a bit more context to that the last time that happened was the Everton 0-0 in 2024. That's the last time that happened for Odegaard in the Premier League.
Yeah,
and I'll try and find it before. I don't think it's happened before.
No, and I'm sorry, like I just don't think that because you're a captain, you're immune from never being substituted. It was my biggest gripe, and I just never understood that. And so simply put, he's shown sample of doing well. Give him a run. We're looking at a player that I think we're asking for different things of, and it's not to banish then at that point. We have plenty of games. It's going to be no problem. And, having somebody that, in my opinion, that struggles and comes out of the firing line, I don't know how many more games in a row you can be substituted at the 60th minute before then that becomes, okay, someone else can have a go.
Yeah, it's his own message. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he knows it as the captain, by the way. Like, he's not some young plucky player. I mean, to do that, I promise you, as a coach, you are sending a message to any player that is consistently starting 90s and playing 90s to then be hooked at that time. It's a message, and it's a message for something. And I must say, I think it's because he's not staying high. I'll be real with you. And I think he is dropping out of the block, and he's not doing what we want in those scenarios.
It's certainly possible. The other thing is an ongoing thing. I think we'll come back to it, but that's kind of where I'm at the minute. Let us know what you think in the comments. Because I think it's
post-Feb Eze is coming, man. It's coming. He's done it every season, so let's see.
It is. Maybe we were saving him. Maybe this was the master plan all along. Right. Thank you so much for your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We'll, of course, come to Discord first, as those of you on the Discord get priority access to the questions because we love you more than anyone else. No, we don't. We love all our children the same. Ben White, Supremacist, says, a group therapy session from Alex, please. I'll try. Bear says, if Havertz's injury is far more serious than we thought, what would be some creative solutions you would like to see Mikel try second half of the season? It seems like all of us have just been biding our time, waiting for Havertz. I don't necessarily want to sort of talk about that because we've spoken a lot about solutions, but the Havertz thing, there are rumours that it's not even rumours that obviously he was in the team. I think he played in the Chelsea game. I could be wrong. Came on in the Chelsea game, played a little bit of time, played in the Portsmouth game as well, and has gone back out of the team. For me, and again, not looking for sort of the silver bullet, because I do think there are fundamental structural issues that Mikel has had, as we've spoken through the tenure, but he would be so helpful. Let's put it mildly, George.
He's the least imperfect one.
Yes, exactly.
If that's the title of the podcast, I think the
least
striker
imperfect
is the least imperfect striker. And he's also, I'm going to reiterate, he's not my perfect striker, but he's the least imperfect. And I think that Havertz is going to show us, I just hope he gets a run of games, because I think he will show the team what they're lacking as far as that point. One of the biggest things too is we've really lost that physical outlet ball as well. Because, even with Mikel Merino, who I think is probably the best version of that, and the strikers that are remaining, still not at Havertz's level as far as going over the top of a press, really simply. It's why big game Havertz was something that people were calling for, even though he was somebody that wasn't as clinical as everybody could want. But he was absolutely someone that got us out of a press. And that outlet from a team is just so important, especially when you're looking to go through people. And it just gives you a different avenue.
It's huge for David Raya. I actually thought David Raya had a really good game on Sunday. But he was passing to Jesus. And that's a different proposition. I actually thought we were bypassing Man United's press pretty consistently. He was making the right decisions. He was delaying his pass. He was claiming things in the air. I don't think he could, to be honest, for me, he couldn't do anything about any of the goals. So I actually thought he had a pretty good game. But yeah, I think we'll rate. David Raya has been rated all season, but we'll look at him even more favourably when Havertz is back in the team. It's a big part of it. Let's do this from Ivan Smith. The way we play seems to be dictated by percentages. This works brilliantly in 2/3 of the pitch. When we get to the final third, it looks like we run out of ideas incredibly quickly, rarely shooting from range and quickly resorting to just giving it to the wingers and crossing. Should the club be looking at getting Mikel his own Pep Linders, a coach dedicated to attacking play who can challenge Mikel and essentially force him to change the way we play in the final third? I think I said this on the instant reaction. I'd be interested in this because it's very hard to comment on internal dynamics. I don't know, right? But in terms of the attacking ideas in the coaching team, we've had the same ones since about 2020, right? We've had Stuyvenberg, we've had Molina. Yes, we've had Gabriel Heinze come in, I appreciate, and Iñaki Canary as well, who I know is involved in the conversations, if not necessarily leading those conversations, obviously. We've had Gabriel Heinze come in, but he, I think, in terms of what we see in the pre-match stuff, is mostly focusing on the defending, and we've also seen his impact on the defending in terms of the levels we've gone to this season. I think we've seen what Heinze's impact is. I would be up for this. I'd be up for someone, I don't know who that is, I don't pretend to know who that is, coming in and just giving this a bit of a shake. And I think that's what Pep was after, and I think Mikel could do with that.
It's really tough because I almost have to make assumptions on things I have zero context on. You would want to think that, and there's no issue with that. I know, and part of the problem is I know that we did look to I don't know what the techie guru, quote unquote, which was a coach that we brought in who was supposed to improve certain things, and I've seen him in pictures and training. So but the problem is I don't know how influential he is and what his exact role is. All I know is that he was called the techie guru and that he was recruited by the coaching staff, and I've seen him in photos.
Tekker's guru, yeah.
Tekker's guru.
Hussein Issa.
Yeah, so but I do think having somebody like a Pep Linders who is going into management and has his own ideas as far as the press goes and being able to have different personalities has been something that was described by Ferguson as a big reason why he evolved, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was one of Ferguson's big remits, and what he attributes to a little bit part of his longevity was recruiting people that were able to challenge him consistently in the backroom staff as far as some of his ideas and evolving, right? So I'll never say no to looking at that. I legitimately don't even know how much this contributes or whatnot, because you'd have to be there to really see it.
Of course, it's hard to say. We're making massive assumptions, but for example, even on that announcement, he's a 34-year-old guy, and I'm sure he's massively qualified. I've no comment on him. He's a 34-year-old guy who's also working with the academy. It's not like a dedicated first team
coach,
attacking phase coach. Maybe it's changed, I don't know, but that was on the initial when they hired him. He was certainly to work with the first team, to help the first team, it says here, and top academy talent. So he's not necessarily in those conversations necessarily as heavily as a Stuyvenberg or whatever. So
can I also throw
I wouldn't be surprised if we did something here.
My only question is, I actually think this is more Albert Stuyvenberg led than anything else, and I think that he's an incredibly important person to Mikel, but he strikes me as somebody that's more responsible for the technical aspects of the game, especially as it results. When I look at it, a lot of our issues that we talk about rigidity are almost Dutch influenced in a way in terms of positioning. Like you look at the Louis van Gaal and you look at some of those things as far as the consistent possession, the conservative possession, but proper positioning and hammering your proper position. And I can't help but assume the major Dutch influence on the team is majorly responsible for some of those things. And it's, again, I don't want to blame him. I don't know, but I'm just trying to give some alternate examples, in the assumption camp, which we can never know unless we're there. But I suspect that personality is very dominant in what we do. And look, we all know, we've all seen some of the things that he's been doing in the touchline, by the way, as far as when players go in and out. I can't not say I've not seen Albert Stuyvenberg say get wide, Trossard, and do those things. And I just wonder how much of that, and if is there someone to challenge that with Mikel? Of course it's speculative, but you also get a sense, right? And
we can't. Of course, we can't say with any security. But I think the Odegaard thing. Not to hammer Odegaard, because we obviously spoke about him a lot in this podcast, but just to go back to him, he's kind of emblematic. He is the player that Mikel seems to be up to now. Maybe that will change. I mean, who knows? And I think certainly some time out of the team will be interesting. If it's good or not, I don't know. But it would be interesting to see if Mikel does that, because he's never done it, right? He's been the player that Mikel is basically ready to die on the hill of, pretty much, other than Saka. But then Saka's had a different career and a different sort of approach to the team and a different impact on the team than Odegaard. That tells me a certain thing, right? It tells me what you want in the final third. It tells me what you're after. It tells me what you're prioritizing. It tells me the type of player that you like, etc., etc. We know how important Mikel is, and when you're starting to put the pieces together, the performances, who the coaching staff are around him, I wouldn't be surprised if he needs some fresh ideas, basically, I guess is what I'm getting at, because we've had Odegaard in the team since 2021. He's been the fulcrum of our attacking performance. We've had the same coaches there since 2021, 2022. There are such a thing as opposition analysts, and they know how we play. And I think a little bit of unpredictability and just some fresh ideas would just be really, really welcome. Because I bet they have a really, really clear methodology for the reason they play, and that's what they stick to, and I hear that. But you need challenging sometimes.
I think more what my frustration has been in terms of the squad makeup, and we look at Ethan Nwaneri, we look at Miles Lewis-Skelly, we look at the impact Zubimendi has even shown in higher areas, we look at Bukayo Saka, we look at Eberechi Eze, like Max Dowman. I've listed off how many players? 5-6 players that you could define as pocket players, by the way. Prior, you could make an argument that it was just a dearth of actual people in the squad, and we had to go and recruit it. Like you wouldn't be wild for saying that. So yes, Odegaard was framed on, but also we simply lacked a lot of pocket players. There was the debate of Vieira and Emile Smith-Rowe as far as it, but we've simply added like another 3-4 players of significant intent. Eze, Saka on the inside. You look at Ethan Nwaneri, okay, fine. I know it's one game. You look at that freaking goal. That kid is a special talent. It's not that he's not ready, but we have people that you could at least argue. Whereas before there was a little bit of, okay, how much of an argument are we debating between people in the squad with Odegaard? He is just the clear go-to. Now it's not so clear. And it's about simply asking are we ready to make that transition as a team? And, we have the players that could do it. And, I think that's why it's a question. And it's more of what this team is actually looking for. And I don't like player wars, and I do believe in the idea that a team can evolve. And somebody who was critical may no longer be critical. And there's people that maybe weren't critical that can become superstars again. Like the squad evolution is a moving post. And it's just a very fancy way of saying this team needs more presence in the pockets. And it's that simple.
It's back to what we said, George. It could be as simple as swapping Rice and Odegaard. It could literally be as simple as that. 100%. It's just fresh, and we're clutching at. Well, is it the coaching staff? Is it? It could be looking at the attacking recruitment, right? It could be the recruitment team. Maybe that's where the fresh ideas are needed in terms of forwards. I mean, if we look at that, but if everyone's basically saying the same thing, it's like you come back to it. Like, you're all saying the same thing just in different words. There's obviously a problem. And however you fix it, we just need some action. Let's come to a couple more from the Discord. Dinny says, teams across the league are overperforming or cheating XG to win games. Are we at a stage now where we can no longer chalk up our conceded goals to luck or worldies and actually admit this is just what is required to score a goal in this league? For me, the way I sort of interpret that, there is a kind of a dearth of sort of capable of the spectacular type goals in type players in our team. Eze was meant to be that. And also in terms of the goals that we've conceded, we do seem to have conceded some unbelievable goals this season. Like when I go back through, is that back to sort of the opposition telling us about ourselves?
I think the frustrating part is that's been actually a description of Mikel Arteta's tenure since the beginning. I think, even at his early years, I swear he had one of the higher percentages of individual mistakes leading to goals, even though we were a team that was incredibly good at preventing goals being conceded. Yeah. Like, it was always something that we did. And I just don't know if there's a relation to that. As far as the point about cheating XG and whatnot, I think it's just because teams are getting better in the Premier League. So it's like, when you get better, good players need to do more good things to score, and it's in unlikely areas. Why? Because teams are defending better. Teams are better. So in order to break the duct, you need to ask players to kind of do things that they may not have normally been asked to do because teams are better. It's really that simple to me. The thing with Arsenal as a whole, we've talked about the idea of a second Maverick, and I don't want to bore people as far as my point consistently, where I look at era-defining teams needing at least 2 superstars. But so there is a superstar question in this team and somebody that's a killer question in this team. And we've had that discussion here on the Cannon. But I think generally the league is moving towards, kind of overperforming XG because teams are getting better. And so the defending is getting better. And so you're asking players whose good chances, they're being phased out because teams are simply better. So players have to respond by one of 2 ways. Either you make teams worse or you start doing things in the iffy chances that are scoring more goals. And I tend to lean to the latter.
Yeah. I think it's why you look at players like Morgan Rogers and why they're thriving in this sort of league.
Yep.
Because they're willing to do it. They're willing to try that sort of, and they have the execution as well. Any more from the Discord? I think we've sort of covered a lot of the stuff that was in there. So let's move to... Oh, no, hang on. Sorry, I missed one. What is your... From Budasham, what is your favourite current player-specific chant? I'm in great pain. Player-specific... I'd like the Jokeres one. He comes from Sweden. The girls are very nice. I like that one. Or the Marino one.
I'd probably go with the Marino one, to be honest with you.
Of course you would. Agenda. Let's go to X. Let's go to this question from... Well, Candy says, could I join you on the recording? I'm not quite sure.
You can join us on Rate My Take if you want to send in a video.
You can indeed. You can do that. Very good, George. I missed that opportunity. Aywell says, do you think this group have a weak mentality? And does that stem from the players not being close to elite inability / mindset like a Rice, Saliba, Gabriel, and Saka?
This is where I have a major problem. Okay, now I have something to say. Okay, the mentality of this team being questioned is something that I really struggle with when you have a look at the results that they've been able to accumulate, not just in the last 4 or 5 years, take it the last year. And it really annoys me that mentality is the point that we are going to when you're looking at a team who has done so well about recovering drawn or losing positions factually this year. So I struggle to talk about a bad mentality when I'm seeing the team rescuing drawn and losing positions more than they have in the last year. I'm struggling to go to mentality when this team have shown major results against some really major teams. And you look in Europe in terms of who we've been able to beat in the last 12 months. You look at PSG, Inter, Bayern, Atletico Madrid. I don't think a mentally weak team is dominating the best teams in Europe in the last 12 months with that. Now, one thing I do think is, everybody can have a bad day, but when I want to describe a mentally weak team, I don't do it with the one leading Europe, leading the Premier League, and leading, a major improvement in rescuing drawn or losing positions in comparison to last year. And a team, by the way, that has only lost, I think, 3 in the league at this point. Am I correct in that? With 27 wins, is it? 3 losses, 27, or not in the league.
Overall 27 wins, I think.
Overall 27 wins, and I forget how many draws, but I swear it's again in the single digits, with like 3 or 4. So just factually, it's a very different spread to what I was seeing last year, in which we absolutely drew too many games. And so, mentality is really a point that you go to, and I think it's something that maybe becomes more relevant in the specific game of the United, but it doesn't become applicable to the team in general. So I'm okay with saying in that game I felt we let ourselves go, and that can happen. But I'm just not comfortable with the team being described as a mentally weak team, given the accolades that it's been able to do.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I'm looking through the individuals here, and David Raya, no, like I watch him interviewed. He's one of the most confident men in the team. I don't buy that. I'm sorry. Saliba, Gabriel, Timber, Miles, like
Rice, Saka. The makeup of the team is not mentally weak.
Individually, like on an individual, but Victor, you're correct. Like on an individual basis, you can say what you want about the way we are, not even. When I see, I mean, how do you ascertain that? I guess you have to just make a judgment off these guys on a kind of individual basis. You see them in interviews, you see them how they react in games, and as you say, the reaction in games has been generally good if the record states. And then on an individual basis, you look at all these guys, you hear them interviewed, you see them speak to each other, you see how they respond on the pitch, etc. Like it's also really difficult as fans, but like, mate, as I said earlier, when that Cunha goal goes in, I literally was like, I hate football, I'm giving up.
Yeah.
And we sit here and call them weak, and like, you know, it's not our job necessarily to go weak, and we're not paid that. But I don't think so. I don't.
I just think the results tell you no. Now, one thing I do think is that this team doesn't know how to win, and it's why, you know, winning is the only way to solve that. That I'm willing to say. I don't think that it's, you know, actually not even. I think that's really harsh. It's not that they don't know how to win, but it's more of a sense that this team needs to receive the accolades that I think it deserves. Like, you know, it's over the last 4 or 5 years accumulated the most points in the Premier League. It's going to start breaking records as far as the amount of consecutive second place finishes. It's not a bad team, but, you know, at some point when you keep doing those things and you don't win, then there's valid questions that come from it. And it's why I always have felt the biggest thing that this team can do is win the Carabao Cup. Truly, mate, I really feel getting the monkey off the back from an expectation lens is something that is a valid factor, you know, to a lot of this.
Yeah, I hear that. And as I say, not to repeat my point, but I think the only thing I'd accuse this team of is maybe wanting it too much at times. Like I really do. That's the only times I've ever thought about it from a mental perspective, looking like we're like even the you know, if we go back to the Wolves game, we obviously got that over the line. That was like, I was watching a team panicking from like 30 minutes. That's what I was, and I was like, okay, like no, I hear it. It's having its. We wanted to spank them, and it's like, okay, but you can just win. Like you can win 1-0, 2-0. Like it's still a win, right? That's for me. It's the overly, and you know, maybe you could say that's mentality. That's also a mentality issue. Fine, but I think the mentality issue in the sense of like probably the pejorative way a lot of people might use it. I'm not saying this commentator is or isn't, but I think a lot of people, certainly outside of Arsenal, might use it is like, oh, they're too weak. I think arguably it's too strong. That might be the other way. That's the only ones where I see it.
Yeah,
it's tricky because we're seeing so much of this, and this is kind of a broader point. We're seeing so much of this season through the lens of previous seasons, and
the win. I just don't think that you can get around it. Like, you know, the reason over analysis, and by the way, the reason that reactions happen like this is because everyone's looking for, is it going to happen again? Is it a pattern? Is it? Yeah. Are we going to do this again? And it's that you must win at all cost has never been higher in this group.
And I saw a tweet from Tim Stillman earlier, which I think in the Premier League I really, really agree with. Has he deleted it? Oh no, here it is. Definitely think Arsenal got the yips a bit yesterday, but not sure where the idea it happens every season comes from. 22-23, squad not big enough and couldn't recover from Saliba injury. Probably lack of experience too. 23-24, 89 points, 91 goals, 49 points from the last 18 games. Not my definition of bottling it. And 24-25, we had so many injuries. We had a central midfielder up front for 3 months. There was no title race because we had so many injuries and we did well to finish second. Now, I look at, for example, like the cup competitions and, you know, like for sort of like the United game, FA Cup, like things like that. And I think if we're isolating the Premier League, I agree. I think the frustration maybe comes from more the quality across all competitions, maybe. But certainly in the Premier League, I don't think there's much to argue with that. Like, and we're viewing it through the same lens. I think, honestly, George, I think 22-23, we may look back on, and when we sort of tell the story of Arteta's Arsenal, we might look back on that as a proper poison chalice, because it was too early. It was far too early. And if we'd started peaking really when we did in 23-24, so 2024, we'd be speaking about the peak of this team beginning in about February, March, April 2024, not September 2022.
Yeah,
which is a big difference. It's a big difference, and a big expectation lag that's sort of setting us up a little bit for failure. That team was not ready. But again, it goes back to what Arteta said last season about timing. You have to have the right timing to win a league. 23-24, that season, that end of the season wins you most Premier League titles. It just didn't because of who we were up against. And this season, that's why I think the frustration is where it is at the minute with where we are, because it feels like the timing is opening up for us. And that's maybe where people are frustrated. But timing matters and context matters. And we're overlaying the previous seasons onto it, which all had their own story and own reasons. But it's like same as our attack, isn't it? There's so many reasons, but you have to put it in the net. You have to get it over the line, and that's what people will reflect on. Oh man, nearly an hour and a half of therapy. I hope that was the group therapy.
Hopefully that made you feel better.
That the Discord were after. It's put words to a lot of feelings. It's I'm optimistic about a change coming. I think, and I don't know whether it will be the sort of big change that everyone will want, because I think I hope it will be you start Mourinho and Eze or something, and I don't know, you play White and Calafiori as fullbacks or whatever it is, where a big shift where you go, okay, something is changing here. I would love that. I think it will be more imperceptible, but I do think with the 4 subs, with the Martin Odegaard substitutions, with the full squad, with Havertz coming back, I do think we might be on the precipice of a shift. My question is, can he do? And it's always been the sustainability, because as I said, I think on a previous podcast, sometimes what happens is we'll fix, in inverted commas, the attacking issues, and then 3 games later we're back at the same conversation. But I think we can fix it enough before maybe ultimately we go into the market in the summer and fix it, hopefully for good.
I think that in a week we're in a different position.
It's a long time in football. It is. It's a long time in football. Thank you all for joining us on the main podcast, The Squad. We'll be back next week, as always, on a Tuesday for you with Rohan, hopefully. But for now, make sure you like and subscribe. As I think, I'm hoping the video is working out on Spotify, so hopefully you guys can see us on Spotify. Leave us a review, all that good stuff. If you're watching us on YouTube or anywhere else, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yes, we'll be back for an instant reaction, I think next to the Kairat Almaty game, is how you say that name, apparently. Thank you, George.
Thank you, good sir.
Thank you so much for watching and listening. And thanks, as always, for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.